Hello. I would like to thank you for being here. Firstly, our online participants and our offline participants here in the Symbeeosis garden in this event of values and leadership in a new regenerative approach. In our times, we can all agree that leadership is not only about creating value, but also about forging new values. Symbeeosis, of course, is a private company, but we can also be a platform. As every platform, we are guided, let's say, by our first three values. Why regeneration? We know that nature provides everything we need if we can take in moderation and without hastiness and using this time to give back, to regenerate. Our business is based on food systems. So we all know that we have the ability to heal ourselves if we look for the right food and the right rhythms. We all know, as Hippocrates has said, that true well-being is found on eating well and being healthy, but also living in harmony with nature. For us, finally, innovation and creativity for change is very important. So today, we're really happy to listen to a legendary leader of system change, Mr. Pedro Tarak, co-founder of Sistema B, BCorp Latin America, participant of WEO, Wellbeing Economy, advisor of many BCorp companies such as Guayaki, very, very interesting, I think, company of natural organic beverage, and Prendia, and so many more projects. So thank you so much, Pedro, for being here in Greece with us. And can I ask, let's say, a first question, why regeneration today?
Mm-hmm. What a question, huh? First of all, thank you very, very much to you, Athanasios, and to the family. I know you from Apivita, the first B Corp of Greece, which has been, you know, like a, I would say, yeah, the reference of regenerative B Corps of Greece and very well known throughout the world. So thank you very much for having me here. I'm just one more Pedro in this world. I share the experience on this earth. When I was born, I think we were about 2.7 billion people. And today, the same little body is about to share the life experience with approximately 8 billion people in the same earth, with the same logic of growth, but in a finite reality. You know, when David Attenborough, a British incredible thinker, I would say, and well, he basically says that the moment we see the planet from outside, then we all realize what's going on inside. And he mentions the pale blue dots from outside. We all have the same experience when we look at the planet from outside. So just for 1 second, let's place ourselves, you know, far away, observing the planet. That's where we all are, right? Personally, I used to be a lawyer, and when I went to school, they taught me that the basis of economics, I went to law school, the basis of economics was the administration of scarce resources. Well, suddenly, after 2009, when Johan Rockström at the University of Stockholm, at the Resilience Center, presented the ecosystem planetary boundaries, then we realized that we're going from the basis of scarcity to a new reality, which is the basis of the new civilization, which is the basically a limitation of I don't know how you say it in English, but a finite reality. Rockstone presented 9 main planetary ecosystems, of which you have the climate, biodiversity, oceans, water, the cycle of nitrogen, the cycle of phosphorus, and basically these 9 are being observed, analyzed. When I saw the presentation of the stage and the state of biodiversity and climate, I thought, we're done. There's no way of getting back. Why? Because once you start deforestation, for example, say one of the global planetary life-producing systems, when you see deforestation, you start seeing also that nature starts the savanization process. And savanization means that nature itself, the forest itself, starts going behind, even if we do any effort for the forest to return back. When I saw that, I thought, well, we need to find a new space, a new way to actually get it back. It's very emotional. Oops, there's a problem. So, in my case, I thought, well, my mindset had been always, here you have the governments to scale solutions, here you have business to produce economic value, here you have NGOs to produce societal value, and that was my logic. We would actually find solutions for pilot projects here and go for scaling up in politics, left, right, center, right? That was my mindset. But if you look into contemporary reality, you notice that with all the efforts of the governments, with all the efforts of CSR, with all the efforts of the NGOs, with left, right, center, with all the efforts of any human organization, and all together, we were going behind all the time. At the same time, Oxfam had been basically measuring the relationship between the famous 1% of the population and global wealth. In 2009, basically what they said, they started to measure 50% of the global wealth in 1% of the population. Now, this goes beyond an ethical issue. This has to do with resilience. We had also experienced the financial crisis. Just in those moments where we started realizing that very few people can make decisions that can affect billions of people, right? So, given that context, given that situation, suddenly a new movement started to emerge of people in different parts of the world organically. Organically, nobody decided to call this other person or this other person. People started to say, there must be something new that we need to rethink. And organically, in South America, in the US, in Europe, basically in Australia, we started doing, trying to find a new way. And personally, I decided to invest in companies that would regenerate. And this is very basic. Why? Because of course you look at what's closer to your reality, right? In my case, very, very close to where I live in Buenos Aires. That's, I don't know how many of you have been in Buenos Aires? How many? Okay. How many of you have been in Patagonia? Ah, good. Well, you know what it means, the distance and the horizon, right? So I come from no limitation in terms of mindsets, You see, if there's a problem, we have it all. We can find the solution ourselves. So what started to happen to me was in the northwest of Argentina, the Atlantic forest, where you have the Iguazu Falls. Perhaps you've heard of the Iguazu Falls. Well, that's, in English it's Atlantic forest. In Brazilian Portuguese it's Mata Atlântica. And it's what you see in Rio de Janeiro, right? Well, what happened with that forest? It used to be the second largest forest after the Amazon in the Americas. So, when the company Guayaki started, there was only 7.8% left. That means that the production of oxygen, that the carbon capturing services of the ecosystem, that the hydrological system has been reduced to that extent. Why? Because of industrial agriculture. Soy, wheat, well, barley, the different commodities, right? Which we all use. And I'm not accusing anyone. We were saying before, it's not a question of saying, Baba, you're bad. I mean, we all come from that mindset. We come from the mindset of maximizing profit, minimizing cost, but those minimizations mean negative externalities, environmental and social externalities, that when they're cumulative, we all pay for it. Someone pays for it, with health, with the ecosystems, with property. So Guayaquil is an example of a B Corp, a regenerative B Corp. How many of you know about B Corps? 1, 2, 3, thank you. 4, okay. It's a new business genetics. It's the evolution of business that together with other B Corps, they become like a Trojan horse for the evolution of the market systems. So let me go into the features of a B Corp with example. The purpose of Guayaquil and of any other B Corp becomes a public good, a collective interest. It's different from the vision, it's different from the mission. It's elevated, right? So, for example, Guayaquil has as its purpose the regeneration of the life system. It was focused, and it is still focused, in that part of the world, right? And how do we do that? That purpose goes into the mission statement of the Article of Incorporation of the Constitution. So it becomes binding. So just imagine the Article of Incorporation in your minds of a for-profit company, yes? It says, the purpose of this company is the regeneration of life systems. And it does it through the beverage industry, with profit and taking the risk as shareholders, right? Of any debt, just like any other company, right? So that goes right there. At the same time, that purpose becomes the core business. So it's legally binding, but it becomes the core business. You optimize or you maximize the purpose. You don't maximize the profit. You maximize the purpose. All right? So everything you do with that purpose. In that purpose, you combine many, many human elements. Today, during our meeting with Nikos and all the team, we discovered that in English, we didn't have the two words that we have in Spanish for asking why. In Spanish, you have the why that explains the reason for which you do something. And then you also have another word which is the raison d'être, is what you actually have as a calling. I come from a country where we, right from the very beginning, we ask ourselves, why do we live? You know, among youth, it's something normal to ask that question. So the inner calling suddenly has a place in the Articles of Incorporation, which is the mission statement, and then it becomes the core business of the company, you see? And then you have the management to achieve that. And you do it through a product or a service in the market. So those are the elements that are linked to the purpose. And that's the main, I would say, for me, the main innovation. But that's just one. So how do we do it in Guayaquil? We buy from indigenous communities, indigenous and campesino farmers cooperatives, small farmers cooperatives of the landless movement in Brazil. We buy them the yerba mate. How many of you know about mate? Ah, there are quite a few, thank you. So mate is a leaf of a standing tree, right? It's a leaf. But because of industrial agriculture, mate became a commodity, a single crop with chemicals and what we know about all industrial agriculture. So what we do instead, we pay from 40 to 60% more the market value of the leaves of the mate as long as our suppliers harvest the leaves from the standing tree. So the leaves from the standing tree have the nutrients of the forest. It's done by nature. So that ingredient becomes the basic ingredient of the beverage guayaki. And we sell the beverage, which is an energy drink. We sell it in North America and in Chile. So the more we sell, the more forest returns back. You see the relationship? So when we say what are the results, and we can talk about Guayaki many hours if you want, because I'm a small shareholder there. What's interesting is that what we measure, our results, we measure 3 dimensions. We measure how many hectares are regenerated, how many families are back into the community, because if you have deforestation because of soy, then the families that used to live in the forest had to go somewhere else. And where do they go? Where do they go normally? To the big cities. Where in the big cities? In the slums. I mean, it's very, very concrete. So that's another dimension that we measure, right? How many families return back and live together as they always wanted to live together, you see? And there's an intimate relationship in between the nature of the ecosystem and the culture. It's all an integrated reality. So just before COVID, my results were my results or the results of all the parties that have to do with the company. So suppliers, customers, investors, collaborators, right? Well, we're 60,000 hectares, the size of Paris, that have been regenerated. Over 1,300 families that are back together with, food sovereignty, with natural organic food. And you won't believe this, in 6 years' time of my investment, 600% increase in the share value. Now, why does this happen? And why do you think Guayaki can compete with a brand like Red Bull with the same price? Why do you think that happens? We compete, we grow over 25% a year, we sell over 30,000 selling points in the 3 countries. Why do you think that happens? Sorry?
Because you love
That's for sure. But why do you think we can compete with the same price? With the same price, with no subsidies, with no cross subsidies or.
Less marketing, more word of mouth.
Yeah, there we go. No budgeting for the marketing. It's all communications of what is happening. And in the purpose, we have the basis for complicity, positive complicity. So there are students, there are around 2,000 volunteering students, as if we were an NGO, that actually want to show the world that there is a different way of doing business, regenerative business, you see? So 2,000 students, then musicians. And you say, musicians? Well, they're the ones who showed up, like saying, we also want to be part of this, of the regenerative culture, but also regeneration process. Musicians. And who are the ones who actually follow the musicians? The Rolling Stones magazine. So we get free advertisement or communication by the Rolling Stone magazine. But then suddenly people just speak about you when you have a purpose with a concrete, mature manifestation of that purpose. It's not only philosophical. It's very mature, you see? So someone actually proposed our name, nominated us for the BBC to an international award, and we suddenly heard about the word that we were one of the 6 winners, and nobody from Guayaquil had done a thing. It was someone from Canada who nominated us. So there you have a free documentary for 1 hour of the BBC crew that went to Guayaquil to actually feature how business was done in a different way. Regenerative business. Like Guayaquil, there are many other companies that are doing the same. There's which are also B Corps. Patagonia, you've heard? Here, the closing, Patagonia is a B Corp, and they also evolved into regeneration. So what happens once you have the purpose which is elevated, you go beyond your products. What you want to pursue is the purpose, but you do it through those products. So Patagonia started with what probably you all know about sports, clothing, right? But then, as their purpose was the regeneration of the planet, now they have Patagonia Provisions, which is food. But you could go on and on and on. Guayaquil also created a logistic company, you see, with the same purpose. So, for example, now we have 256 electric vehicles. They are driven by former incarcerated employees in their first job. And it's the regeneration of the trust. Just imagine, after coming out from the prison, you can have trust from a company, from business. And they are the ones who actually drive an electric vehicle and distribute in the last 5 miles. They distribute the products that come from regeneration in South America. You see, regeneration of ecosystems and of communities. So there you have like just one model of a regenerative business. But you have many other companies that are already there. Now, as the title of the conversation today was values, or is values and leadership in a new regenerative approach and economy, is where are the opportunities? Well, there's a very concrete fact. After family, the most numerous of all human organizations are business. And the most numerous of all daily decisions are of commercial nature. So that's where suddenly leadership starts evolving, looking there in business, in the evolution of business, and in the evolution of commercial transactions. These are the two universes where people start innovating You know, we think of innovation mainly through technology and, of course, business models. But that's very recent, you see. So these are the two main universes where we're looking into. But not that someone decided to look. I mean, suddenly many people from different parts of the world are looking there. It's like, see, you suddenly have a new lens. So there, I just thought, perhaps if it resonates to you, there are 5, I would say, generic values-principles that at least I look into as a filter, a mental filter for myself. One is basically the value of togetherness. The value of togetherness above the value of agreement. The value of togetherness above the value of agreement. Why? Because we're together as an objective reality on Earth. So if we celebrate and cherish togetherness, we have many more possibilities to be productive and live together. So that's one value that I feel that can be also, I would say, promoted by this kind of leadership. A second element, a second value principle, I would say, is interdependence. Interdependence beyond independence. Why? Because the planet is telling us that everything is interdependent. For example, just as an example of one of the companies that I know, Guayaki, when we realized that the rainfalls in the area of our suppliers came through the flying rivers from 5,000 kilometers away north from the Amazon, we decided that we wanted to acknowledge our interdependence with those who keep the Amazon standing. And we signed a rainfall agreement. And we introduced a fictitious cost into our annual budget of only $50,000, you see? But we need it because we don't know how to do it technically speaking. Because we don't yet know how technically we can measure the volume of water that comes through the flying rivers. You know that you have the flying rivers, right? And you have all the interconnections up and down. Everything is interconnected, right? So we celebrated an agreement that actually sends that money to 18 ethnic groups in the southern Colombian Amazonian region. Now you say, nobody forced you to do that, right? Do we earn more money for doing that? Who knows? We're being consistent. Once you're driven by the purpose, what happens is that all the time you start innovating. You start, I would say, trying to become consistent with what you believe and with your purpose. Once you realize, you can't stop. You just have to do it, right? And of course, what happens with that kind of leadership is that you become a model leadership. So, you know, companies like Coca-Cola start looking at you. See, this is what's interesting about, you know, Apivita Symbeeosis. Of course, you see, these are companies that suddenly others are observing as references. But what's the most important feature? Consistency. And that also grants, in my view, you know, the kind of integrity that you feel morally. You feel, you know, that you're actually fulfilling the inner call and also your behavior as individuals, but also as companies. And that creates immense possibilities because you start building the complicity by, excuse me, by thousands of people who are following you, you see? So that's a second principle that I see. Another principle, value that I'm seeing in this kind of leadership is how you go from the completely segmented logic, like compartment type of logic. You see, here's the finances, here's the marketing, here's the sales, here's the da-da-da. It's all separated towards integrated, holistic management and value creation. And that you see everywhere. So for that reason, the B Corps have a second element, is how to measure. How to measure in an integrated way. And there's a tool which is called the B Impact Assessment tool, which is very useful. And I always say, every time I come here, but I always talk about Socrates, when I have to share about the value of this uniqueness. It's a tool that measures the business, not the products, not the processes. It's not a certification for products and processes. It's a system that looks into the organization as such, the business organization, in 5 areas. Well, of course, you all know because of Apivita, but basically the relationship, impact of the company with the collaborators. And you have almost 200 questions in this tool, almost 200. And this tool is related to collaborators, it's related to the customers or clients, it's related to all of the other communities. It can be suppliers, it can be neighbors, it can be social, environmental movements, communities. It's related to the environment, your impact, which is local, global, which is short-term and long-term, and it's related to your governance, your transparency, your accountability. And you have all kinds of questions, and every 3 years, this tool is revisited, and once you become a B Corp with a minimum of 80 points out of 200, then you have to improve all the time. You might have heard that Nespresso became a B Corp about a month ago, and it was a big quarrel against Nespresso because of lots of people saying Nestlé can't be a B Corp. Well, what I'm saying personally is that all companies can move in that direction. And if you have, Nespresso has an amazing policy towards suppliers. They have almost 300,000 small farmers, well, coffee farmers, and they have an excellent payment policy. And they help the suppliers, their supply chain. Now, they're not perfect, but none of the B Corps are perfect. They're all trying to improve. So it's not a system to include the ethical best or the ethical, the perfection. It's a system where companies can move into the new economic and market system that creates value for society and the planet at the same time. So that's the second element, right? And it's based on the principle of basically of going from the parts to the whole. See? Then you also have another principle, which is that we're all part of this feast or this journey. So it's the principle of balancing the interest. If I tell you I'm a rich person, suddenly you get lots of interest. But if I tell you I'm a neighbor, what happens? Does it create an interest? Well, what happens with the B Corps is also in the article of incorporation that we change what we call legally the limited fiduciary liability. This comes from the Industrial Revolution. Limited liability. Said in Spanish, responsabilidad limitada. It's limited responsibility, right? Now, let's go to the source of that notion. Because this is not about good or bad, huh? This is about our evolution. So, way back during colonial times, when the expeditionary would go to, from Britain or Holland would go to India or Indonesia, the investor would actually ask for a clause, right? Like saying, as they would go far away, they would ask for a clause saying, you must, first of all, pay me back. So that clause was signed in the agreement, right? Which is reasonable, right? Now, that clause started to be used in London, locally, and during the same moment that in Britain they started to create the legal corporate entities. In the same time. But of course, then, for example, with that clause, the miners had their revolution, remember? Because of the kids being used in the mining in Britain. And of course, then you had the legislation. So there, structurally, operatively, the corporate company acts started to have the limited liability clause, which basically meant maximize the interest of the shareholder and minimize the other costs. By nature, in order to balance that, what we normally did was to adopt a legislation. But it's very inefficient if you think about it, that for each aspect that we can't actually, deal in the economic system, we need a new legislation. So what do we do in the B Corp world? We take that clause in the Articles of Incorporation and we expand the fiduciary liability. So the interest of the shareholders are balanced with the interest of all the other stakeholders. The short-term interest are also balanced with the long-term interest. The local impact is balanced with the global impact. And that goes embedded into this new corporate identity. That's why I say, at least this is my interpretation, it's a new genetic for business. Now, having said that, the shareholders are still the owners, so they're the ones who actually decide if they want to be that way. And if there is a judicial case, it's because there's a conflict probably between the shareholders and the management. Because of that, in some countries of the world, there's a new legislation called legal benefit corporation status. And Italy adopted, it's called società benefit. Entreprise à mission it's not exactly the same, but it's probably quite similar in France. Then you have over 40 states in the United States that have adopted this legislation. And in Latin America, there are 5 countries: Colombia, Ecuador, Peru, Uruguay, and now Panama. So, in terms of benefit corporations, B Corps, there are over 5,000 B Corps in the world. And these are privately certified. In terms of legal status, there are also about 5,000 companies. There are over 2,000 in Italy. There are over 3,000 in Latin America. In total, I think there are 5,500 legal benefit corporations. In a country like Chile, the president of Chile, when the latest president, in his first trip outside Chile, he went to Argentina. And his business committee, he invited the president of Sistema B, Chile, as a symbol of a new kind of business. The president of Colombia opened up the forum of benefit corporations with over 2,000 companies, and he himself explained the features of the legal benefit corporation. I'm sharing this because perhaps it sounds like something for the future, but this is already happening now. And so this, I would say, it's a little bit like the feature of the B Corps. I personally love sharing 3 elements through the B Corps. One, that if you look at all the other social organizations, clubs, religions, political parties, sports clubs, you have 3 elements. Emotions, right? We agree with that. You have emotions in all of those, right? 2, you have the sense of belonging. And in a world of, of individualism, we need the sense of belonging. And 3, the sense of legacy. Okay, in business, we lost that. So what we actually are talking about is how those 3 elements return back to business. Having said that, there are many elements that I'm sure we could speak about the B Corps, about the benefit corporations, but one thing which is very important is that once you have a number of B Corps and a number of benefit corporations, then all the other marketplaces start operating as well. For example, in the city of Mendoza, the city has adopted a regime of procurement, of what we call impact procurement, and pays from 5 to 10% more to their suppliers, as long as they also change their way of doing business. The export promotion agency of the province is already promoting that kind of companies. So the identity starts being that way. I shared I forgot your name. Yeah. Dimitrios, yes, that the University of Mendoza, the National Public University of Mendoza, as from this year, already offers the degree for impact business administration to start training the future managers of companies. You see? And the 8 universities of that province now decided that the professors were not ready to teach. So the CEOs and corporate financial managers and other managers are now training professors at the university with practical cases. And the 8 universities which you find in the city of Mendoza have now announced a public agreement to reduce 50% of the carbon footprint for 2030 with a shared plan. What this does is that elevates the purpose of all human organizations through the market incentives, and through business, so we can actually face the kind of problems that we're reading and listening and experiencing. Climate, poverty, inequality, and basically elevates everybody to that place. It's a new way of competing as companies, but also as regions. And with Melbourne, Mendoza, we made a presentation last week, 2 weeks ago in Perugia, in Italy, for basically developing together what we call impact regional denomination of origin, going from the logic of Kalamata olives to the logic of, Andros becoming an impact region. But of course, it's creating the favorable conditions for that. And that's to attract financial resources, to basically attract talents, and to have a new definition and a new identity from an economic and a market perspective. So.
Hello? Yes. Fantastic. I would like now to sum up a little bit, because we are officially the offline crowd here. There is an online people with us today. So maybe we can sum up some of the comments of the people that listen to us, and by Ruben O'Doherty, who is a Spanish journalist and communication professor, and one of his specializations has to be with Sustainable Development Goals in El Español. So let's try to connect with him and then ask some questions here in the offline crowd again.
If you listen to me, I can say that thank you very much, Mr. Tarak, for your excellent, amazing conference, and also Athanasios and Symbeeosis team for this opportunity to share together also internationally. So thanks, everyone. So maybe I can try to summarize some of the online questions, if you can hear me. So one of the first questions that we find here is for Mr. Tarak. What, in your experience, is the best way to connect reluctant leaders to a higher purpose, to be part of this era? How can we connect this kind of reluctant leaders?
Okay, shall we go question by question, Ruben?
Yeah, perfect.
Okay, thank you. First of all, personally, I look for opportunities. I'm a business person, right? So I look for where are the best opportunities. And the best opportunities are not with the reluctant, are with those who are ready for the next step, always. So in my case, it's not about convincing, it's about sharing. So I share from my guts, I share my results, I share the fun I'm having, and the new horizons that I can see for everybody, yeah? And with that logic, you have amazing companies in Latin America, but also in the world. I don't know if you know Café Ili. You see, Ili, Davides, you have from any industry. Well, you know, Nespresso, you have Patagonia, you have Natura Cosméticos, you know, Natura, that they bought Avon, the Body Shop, Aesop. So you have really, you know, big famous brands. And the only way that that happened was by sharing. And of course, it's in the atmosphere that without criticizing politics, we're starting to feel that it's not enough. That this is something, if we want to approach the kind of challenges that we're all facing globally, we need to be part, all of us, of the solutions. Now, if you think about the role of business, if one thinks about the role of business, that is a lever to connect with millions of people, and given that business is the most numerous of all human organizations after family, then suddenly, you know the aha moment, does that happen to you? That suddenly you say, yeah, this is a way we can actually reach out to billions of people with example of how to do it and through the everyday commercial relationships. So suddenly, that becomes, you know, a very attractive new horizon of innovation beyond technological innovation. It's beyond. And of course, you start doing it where you have your best opportunities. You don't go, you know, to the theory of who would be the best. It's where you have the best opportunities. And the best opportunities are with you, with you, with you. It's with human to human. And it's just sharing.
Thank you. Thank you very much for your amazing answer. And also, just to summarize here some other two questions I'm trying to translate from the Spanish. Could we describe some of the characteristics of a leader as a kind of inner development goals? One asked about that.
Yeah, have you heard of the inner development goals? You know, you have the sustainable development goals. Yeah, the SDGs. Yes, the UN sustainable development goals that are 17, and they're very much, you know, driven by these, you know, the different standards. And there is in fact something which is called the SDG Action Manager, which is of the Global Compact. So any company which belongs to the Global Compact can use the SDG Action Manager, which is the tool very similar to the B impact assessment. The inner development goals, I'm not personally engaged, but it's something that has been evolving recently, and it has a lot to do, for me, of a spiritual source. Mostly a spiritual source. And it inspires me a lot to look inwards as what happens outwards. The relationship in between ourselves and the human organizations. There's a direct connection in between how we organize ourselves and the possibility to be ourselves, and vice versa. And Ruben, may I do a digression, or would you like to continue with the questions?
I think that, do you have any more questions? I think that sums it up.
No, I think we're done. Thank you very much, yeah, for the connection.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ruben. Thank you very much. Thank you. Okay.
So I think that now we can stay offline. Yes, we can stay offline, and if some people here would like to ask some questions, would be the good moment to do so before we move and ask each other questions in the garden. So,
are there any examples of big corporations in the financial sector? Is there any salvation for an investment banker, for example? It was very difficult to calibrate the profit and the wider benefit of the society.
Yeah, Lombard-Odier, you have banks, you have almost 50 banks of the Global Alliance for Banking on Values. Companies like Bancolombia, which is the largest private bank in Colombia, have decided they announced that they take the journey towards becoming a B Corp. So they start using the measurement, which helps a lot in that direction. For example, Bancolombia has a product, a financial product, which is for regenerative companies. So of course it has to do with the interest rates, and they have their group, which is much more than Bancolombia, is now, I forgot the name of the company that they own, that is helping SMEs, but like 30,000 SMEs, to readjust themselves to become regenerative exporting companies. Because regeneration seems to become a new element of global competition. But why? Because we're all facing the same. We're all facing the reduction of life-supporting systems. That's the reason. It's not because it's now a new fashion. It has to do with what's happening, you see? Because otherwise one would think, this is a new fashion, this is the evolution of CSR, or this is the evolution of sustainability. No. This has to do with what's happening to all of us. By the way, I forgot to mention Danone. Here you are. I'll tell you more now about Danone.
No, still not in Greece, in worldwide. It's a little bit disappointing to listening that there are 5,000 big corps worldwide, and in Greece to be just one. We need to work on this. But taking from previous question, we miss the, when you are looking to the big corp movement and you see the companies, you miss the digital companies there. Absence. And I believe, I don't find the reason, and maybe you can share a little bit more on this, why digital companies are out of this. Because digital companies are actually leading and can be the leaders in this movement, if I can say.
Well, I would say that, I'm not sure if they're missing. I'm an investor in one company, which is e-commerce, right? But Mercado Libre, which is the second largest, it's in the Spanish-Portuguese world, it's the largest e-commerce company in the world, is already also walking in that direction, using the tools. You have over 2 260,000 companies in the world using the tool. So that's why that's confidential, it's free, it's online. You can take your company and just use it. Just use it and see what happens to you. These are all Socratic questions. It doesn't mean that it's prescriptive. You see, you just take the tool and you just apply it to yourself. And then you can measure. You can measure, your integrated value creation, or said in other words, your impact, your integrated impact, right? But you can measure. Of course it's arbitrary, because all measurements are arbitrary, all of them, because we're humans. But it's the same one for all, so it helps you to measure yourself, compare yourself with the past, compare yourself with the competition, compare yourself with other industries. And let me say something about Danone, because all of this is about human stories, right? When we started Sistema B, you have B Lab in the United States. They're the ones who created the B Corps. Simultaneously, 4 friends in South America, Colombian, 2 Chileans, and myself, we started with the same search, with the anguish of not knowing what to do. Because our logic was basically, as I shared, you see, trying to find the solutions in politics. And suddenly we said, hey, we need to do something with our own companies. And we created Sistema B, and then we met with the founders of B Lab in the United States, and we said, this is our Trojan horse. And so with that, I thought, which are the companies that have most numbers of exchanges, commercial exchanges? And I thought, well, I need to go to my friends. And suddenly, the head of the Danone Waters company in Argentina, which is very big in Argentina, called me. I said, let's have a coffee. And with him, we were able to actually get the second B Corp of the company. But simultaneously, the Spanish dairy company had gone through the same journey in those times. And what was fascinating for me were the conversations that I would have with the different departments of a very large company. Once Danone became once Danone Waters became a B Corp in Argentina, then the other large companies started to call. You see, the importance of suddenly having someone who's interested, and the only thing you do is, you share. You share a tool, you share an option of how to evolve, the legal, amendments, and then, it's the culture. You see, you go from a culture which is, we all come from a very extractive culture, and we all know about Danone, about the plastic and how. And the fact that Danone became a B Corp with the plastic bottles, now all the plastic is recycled. But they're all very well aware that there must be a new solution also. So for example, in Guayaquil, we openly tell the world that we need help with one of our big challenges. We are one of the founding B Corps in the world, Guayaquil. But we have aluminum cans. And we tell the world, hey, help us with this. We don't know how to solve it. So B Corps are companies that are not perfect, but are ready to improve all the time. And that's what I found of Danone. And that's what I'm finding now with Nespresso. Nespresso is being attacked all the time. You see what I want to say? So tomorrow I have the chance of meeting the team of Danone in Greece. And thanks to Simos and Katerina. Yeah, thank you.
If we have any questions, or if we would like to take this to the garden, let's say to enjoy a drink and go and discuss. Or
Sorry, I didn't get that.
yeah. Any other questions? Anybody would like to ask just a final question to?
Right. When you become a B Corp, it's because you already achieved these changes. You see, because you have to actually do the amendments for the stakeholder balance. It's instead of shareholder primacy, you go to a stakeholder governance. Now, having said that, it's not easy, right? So, but once you become a B Corp, that's the minimum that you have to achieve in your bylaws. Of course, the shareholders are the ones who sign that. You see, it's not someone from outside. It's not the legislation. Now, the legislation has exactly the same legal elements as the B Corps, exactly the same. But again, for the time being, it's voluntary. My intuition is that we might see in our lives the compulsory, mandatory obligation of all companies to become benefit corporations, legal benefit corporations, not the private B Corps, but the benefit legal corporations. I think that will come because it's part of the evolution of the capitalist system, in my perspective. And basically what are we saying is that we elevate the reason of any economic organization to the common good, to producing explicit common good materialized in concrete results. And yours can be, I don't know, regenerating water cycle. The other person could be regenerating the trust in the community. Others can be recovering the culture of the islands. Others can be recovering the population of bees. Other can be, you know what I mean? Because also to connect. Others can be, and they all do it with whatever industry. You see, each company chooses what to do, right? So my sense is that this is coming for all over the world. In a world that we still have the dominance, you know, we also come from the notion of national interest above global interest. And we see it now with Russia, right? Or the United States. But I think that the global interest will start gaining more and more, you know, recognition. And for that, I think the markets are going to be operating. One thing that we also know is that the counting system of the largest companies will start becoming triple bottom line with numbers. I think that's coming along as well. And of course it won't be through the legislation, but it will be through funding, through the impact funding, through the investment flow. This is what I'm seeing. So,
Pedro, congratulations for your speech.
thank you.
Thank you very much. I'm curious, and I'd like to ask you, we are coming out from a very tough pandemic. So I'm wondering, do you think that the model of sustainability could be strong enough so as to protect us from different type of crises, health crisis, financial crisis, climate crisis? Thank you very much. I know it's a little bit strange, but I think that you have the spirit to answer it.
Well,
Thank you very much.
thank you for the question. What other option have we got? Where do we build our optimism? I mean, I'm asking to myself, but also to you and everybody. Where do we build the basis of optimism, of massive optimism? And my sense is that life can only be worth it if we have an horizon of possibilities for all. And sustainability has many dimensions, many dimensions, applied to corporations, but also applied to politics. And in 1992, we still didn't think of the markets as being a new space to create public goods. We always thought that that was something, you know, for politics and for NGOs. And that through the market, we would only produce economic and financial value. The novelty today is that for the first time, we also think of every single organization, instrument, and dynamics of the market to also produce collective goods. This is new, but it requires like a mental shift. It requires paradigm shifts, behavioral shifts, cultural shifts, organizational redesign, and of course, you know, individual rethinking of what's our leadership. My sense is that there's no other option but to expand all of our options. And suddenly we have this new option. We make money doing good. We measure what that means. It's not theoretical. And we are accountable with transparency of what are the results, but not only financial results, but also environmental and social results and cultural results, and see how the spiritual dimension of human beings can be really the source of our interconnections again in a very individualistic society, so, or global society. So for me, it's the only way. And you'll see a huge industry on sustainability consultancy growing all over. Now, where I find an opportunity for the Greeks, because of your cultural tradition, is basically a consultancy that enables people from all over the world to listen to their inner callings and be able to translate that inner callings into language that becomes the resonance to society and the market. Not many societies have practiced Socratic conversations. And this is something that actually connects us with South America and the Greeks. You know this. See, it's the connectivity, the human connection, the opportunity to connect our souls, to create value for others. So that's why today I was asking, what's your USP, the unique selling point of Symbeeosis, right? But I think one can ask, what's the USP of Kalamata? Is it olives, or is it much more than olives? See? And the USP of Greece, is it tourism? Is it beautiful, you know, islands and great sun? Or is it much more than that? You see? And that in the global markets. So that's the reason for which with Melbourne, Mendoza, and now hopefully Umbria, we're developing this, you know, the regional impact denomination of origin. Because we need to go from the individual to the collective, from cooperation to complementation. And we all know that we can't achieve our dreams only by ourselves. So we can only achieve the kind of dreams that we have if we complement each other. We combine our abilities, we combine our strengths. It's not only cooperating. That's obvious, but it's also much more than that. Agreed.